Welcome to Biology, the scientific study of life. Disturbance influences species diversity and composition. Decades ago, most ecologists favored the traditional view that biological communities are in a state of equilibrium, a more or less stable balance unless seriously disturbed by human activities. This balance of nature view focused on interspecific competition as a key factor determining community composition and maintaining stability in communities. Stability in this context refers to the tendency of a community to reach and maintain relatively constant composition of species in the fact of disturbances, but in many communities, at least when a local scale change seems to be more common than stability. This recent emphasis on change has led to a non-equilibrium model, which describes communities as constantly changing after being buffeted by disturbances. We will now take a look at the influence of disturbances on community structure and composition. What is disturbance? Disturbance is an event such as a storm, fire, flood, drought, overgrazing, or human activity that changes a community, removes organisms from it, and alters resources availability. The types of disturbances and their frequency or severity vary from community to community. A high level of disturbance is generally the result of high intensity and high frequency of disturbance, while low disturbance levels can result from either a low intensity or low frequency of disturbance. Storms disturb almost all communities, even those in deep oceans. Deep oceans fire is a significant disturbance in most terrestrial communities. In fact, grasslands and chaparral biomes are dependent on regular burning, as shown in this figure. Freezing is a frequent occurrence in many rivers, lakes, and ponds. Many streams and ponds are disturbed by spring flooding and seasonal drying. By gathering data from specific communities over many years, ecologists are beginning to appreciate the impact of disturbances. Although the term disturbance implies a negative impact on communities, this is not always the case. For example, disturbances often create opportunities for species that have not previously occupied habitats in the community. Small-scale disturbances sometimes enhance environmental patchiness, which can be a key to maintaining species diversity in a community. The intermediate disturbance hypothesis, which is supported by a broad range of studies of terrestrial and aquatic communities, suggests that moderate levels of disturbance can create conditions that foster greater species diversity than low or high levels of disturbance. High levels of disturbance reduce species diversity by creating environmental stresses that exceed the tolerance of many species, which are then excluded from the community, or by subjecting the community to such a high frequency of disturbance that slowly colonizing or slowly growing species are excluded. At the other extreme, low levels of disturbance can reduce species diversity by allowing competitively dominant species to exclude less competitive species. Meanwhile, intermediate levels of disturbance can foster greater species diversity by opening up habitats for incubation by less competitive species, yet not creating conditions so severe that they exceed the environmental tolerances or rate the recovery by potential community members. A frequent small-scale disturbances can also prevent large-scale disturbances in some communities. However, large-scale disturbances are a natural part of others, such as the forests of Yellowstone National Park. Much of this park is dominated by lodgepole pine, a tree that requires the rejuvenating influences of periodic fires. Lodgepole cones remain closed until exposed to intense heat. When a forest fire burns the trees, the cones open and the seeds are released. The new generation of lodgepole pines can then thrive on nutrients released from the burned trees and in the sunlight, which is no longer blocked by taller trees. In the summer of 1988, major fires occurred in Yellowstone, resulting largely from a severe drought accompanied by high winds. By 1989, burned areas in Yellowstone were largely covered with new vegetation, suggesting that the species in this community are adapted to rapid recovery following massive disturbance by fire. And in fact, large scale, notice that in this figure, before and on year after fire. Um, in fact, large-scale fires have swept through the lodgepole pine forests of Yellowstone and other northern areas for thousands of years. In contrast, more southerly pine forests were historically affected by frequent but low-intensity fires. In these forests, a century of human intervention to suppress small fire has allowed an unnatural build-up to fuels and elevated the risk of large severe fires to which the biota is not adapted. Studies of the Yellowstone forest community and many others indicate that they are non-equilibrium communities, changing continually because of natural disturbances and the internal processes of growth and reproduction. And there is mounting evidence that some amount of non-equilibrium resulting from disturbance is the norm of most communities. Um, Human disturbance. For all animals, humans have the greatest impact on biological communities. Worldwide agricultural development has disrupted what were once the vast grasslands of the North America prairie. Logging and clearing for urban development, mining and farming have reduced large tracts of forests to small batches of disconnected woodlots in many parts of the United States and throughout Europe. After forests are clear cut and left alone, woody and shrubby vegetation after colonizes the area and dominates it for many years. This type of vegetation is also found in agricultural fields that are no longer under cultivation and in vacant lots and construction sites that are periodically cleared. Human disturbance of communities is by no means limited to the United States and Europe, nor is it a recent problem. Tropical rainforests are quickly disappearing as a result of clear cutting for lumber and pasture land and centuries of overgrazing and agricultural disturbance have contributed to the current famine in parts of Africa by turning seasonal grasslands into great barren areas. Because human disturbance is often severe, it usually reduces species diversity in community. Okay, back to patchiness and recovery following a large-scale disturbance. The 1988 Yellowstone National Park fire destroyed large areas of forest dominated by lodgepole pines. A notice represents this figure soon after fire, as this photo taken soon after the fire shows the burn left a patchy landscape. Note the unburied trees in the distance. Notice that. Notice be 1 year after fire, this photo of the same general area taken for the following year indicates how rapidly the community began to recover a variety of herbaceous plants different from those in the former forest cover the ground.